Okay, here we go. All right, so welcome to this training on the opioid epidemic and how to reverse an overdose using naloxone, which is the generic term for something we all hear referred to as Narcan. We are going to cover today quite a bit of information. I'm going to go pretty quickly because I think for a lot of people, some of this is pretty well known or a refresher, but just give me a holler if you have any questions at any point. We're going to talk a little bit about terminology related to opioids, types of opioids, how opioid misuse develops both in the individual and what the trends have been in society, the connection to suicide that we want everyone to be aware of. We're going to look at some current data at the national and state level. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how you would recognize someone who might have overdosed, how you would administer Narcan, and then share some resources that you should know and messaging. So to begin, what are opioids? So we hear the term opioids and we sometimes hear the term opiates. So opioids are the entire family of narcotic drugs that relieve pain, okay? They act directly on the nervous system. They are used medicinally to relieve pain. And of course, they are used illicitly for people to get high. They are addictive. And as you can see in this graph here, opioids is the outer circle because it's the broadest term, which includes opiates. So what are opiates? Those are the same type of drug, but they're the ones that are naturally derived from the poppy flower. Opium, morphine, heroin, codeine, those are opiates. These other ones like Vicodin, Percocet, Oxy, fentanyl, those are synthetic versions created in a lab to mimic chemically the product and its effects. So opioids come in all kinds of forms, pills, liquids, and powders. And you're going to hear me talking about opioids generally, and then sometimes about synthetics. So again, we're talking about these kinds of things from the lab. Now, we just saw some names of different types of opioids. I'm putting this screen up with a whole list of names because here's one of the things that happens. People read about the opioid epidemic in the newspaper, and then they go home and they open their medicine cabinet and they have a bottle of, hydrocodone in there that someone prescribed to them at some point for like a bad back or after a surgery. They didn't finish it and they left it in the medicine cabinet thinking this will be great to have if anything happens, if anything comes along. And they're not even aware that hydrocodone is an opioid, right? They're not connecting the dots. So I think one thing that's important for us when if the topic comes up, or if you're working with a client or a person who's maybe struggling with substance use, is let's make sure people know what opioids are. They are these types of drugs that may be in your medicine cabinet. A lot of these are used medicinally. Some of the heroin is never used medicinally. That's just fully illicit. Fentanyl is used in surgery as an anesthetic, but you're going to see that that's now one of the biggest problems we have in the opioid epidemic is that it's out there in the neighborhood. Methadone is a type of opioid, but it's also used to actually treat opioid use disorder. So heroin versus synthetics. I already mentioned heroin comes from the poppy flower. It's a natural product. Here's something that kind of will explain what we're going to talk about, which is how the opioid epidemic has morphed over time. Heroin costs about $3,000 to $4,000 per kilo to produce, right? Because you have to go like grow flowers and pick seeds and dry them and do whatever else happens to them. It's an expensive, labor-intensive process. Now, what if you go into a lab and can synthesize it? You can literally create drugs for pennies a pound. And so synthetics have been like increasing in popularity, produced by cartels in Mexico and China in particular, shipped all over the world, and they are out there in the drug supply right now. It's the biggest issue we have. And it's because it's so cheap to produce. So if you can read what it says down here at the bottom of the screen, 1 kilo of fentanyl can produce 16 to 24 kilos of drug product and yield $1.3 million on the streets. So these things are moneymakers for the cartels. And let's look at how strong they are. So everyone's pretty familiar with the concept of heroin. You know how strong it can be. Fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin. Carfentanil is 100 times stronger than fentanyl because carfentanil was created as a tranquilizer for elephants, rhinos, hippos, like huge, large game that like zoos and veterinarians have to anesthetize. Just take a look at this picture up here on the upper right. This amount of heroin could be a lethal dose. And in comparison, carfentanil and fentanyl, it's like a dusting could kill you. So these products are really strong, and that is leading to overdose deaths today. In particular, just looking at what happened in the last year in 2020, overdose deaths rose by 56%. Okay, that's nationally. So overdose deaths had actually started to turn the corner, had started to decrease a couple of years ago because of all the attention to the opioid epidemic, new laws curbing the number of days of prescriptions people could get right off the bat. And then when fentanyl started really being laced into everything, the deaths started to increase again. So by last year, again, 82% of people who died from an overdose had some kind of synthetic drug, usually fentanyl, in them. Now, two recent alerts that were put out by the Department of Public Health right here in Connecticut. The most recent one was just in November, and it's that there were almost 40 cases of people who overdosed and had to be revived, where the only product that they believed that they were using was marijuana, but the fentanyl was in there. And so they ended up overdosing on fentanyl, thinking they just had marijuana. So fentanyl is really literally in everything. They've been saying it for a while, but there was the proof. So Connecticut was unfortunately top of the news nationally because we were the first state where they were really proving that this was a problem right now. The September press release over here is talking about fake prescription pills containing fentanyl and or meth. And by fake prescription pills, we're talking about this other new, relatively new trend last few years called counterfeit drugs. And this is where the cartels are taking sometimes fentanyl, sometimes fentanyl and Xanax, sometimes like they have actual prescription drugs that they're making in a lab illicitly and mixing them with fentanyl. And sometimes they're just making fentanyl, but what they're doing is making it look identical to other prescription drugs and getting it out there in the market. So here is a picture of real Xanax versus counterfeit Xanax, real Oxy, counterfeit, real Adderall, counterfeit. As you can see, they are, they're like made to be the same size. They have the same numbers, colors, etc. They're virtually indetectable, very difficult even for law enforcement to identify the difference. And these are more and more in the market. I know of a kid from Trumbull, someone from Fairfield who died in the last 2 years because they thought they were taking a Xanax and it was fentanyl. Why is this happening? Because it creates a new market, right? Because if people get the product and don't die, it's very hyper addictive. And also it's part of it is a sales strategy where apparently some of these cartels are now like you can go online on the dark web and you can order a bottle of fentanyl pills that are going to look like Xanax, and they're going to print a Walmart pharmacy label right on that bottle with your name and what looks like a health insurance number on there. And they're going to give you something that you can just have in the dashboard of your car. And if someone pulled you over and saw it, it looks like you have a prescription drug made out to you on your person. It doesn't, like, there's no way to tell that it's an illicit opioid. How many people have been hearing about this? I've been hearing about this a lot from Bobby Lawler from the high intensity drug trafficking team. Is this news to folks? You guys are muted, so I don't know what you're saying.
I know a few clients who have family members or friends that have died from drug overdose that was mixed with fentanyl.
It's
I've definitely heard of counterfeit pills. I've taken counterfeit pills myself, and I've taken laced heroin before with fentanyl, and it's definitely really powerful for sure. And I definitely have heard of people making labels and stuff like that. In fact, you can actually, a lot of people don't even have to go to the dark web. You can make it on a lot of craft printing type machines and can make it at home, especially if you can scan an older prescription, because with a little bit of,
and just
you know,
edit
a little bit of editing, you can make it look that way. And unfortunately, but a lot of times what people do is they will, you know, really look up, thank goodness for the prescription monitoring program, which I know you'll probably cover, because it can actually verify if you really do have it.
an actual prescription. Yeah, and so I think like, whoops, I'm gonna go back to here because what I should have highlighted is this new website the state has created called youthinkyouKnowCT.org, and it's great information for anyone, for the general public, but especially for parents also to really be informed about what's going on, what's out there, how can you talk about this with your family members. But it just means that a critical message that all of us should be sharing with people is if you are going to use any kind of drug, it needs to be written, the prescription needs to be written to you by a doctor, and you need to go fill that prescription yourself at a pharmacy. Like you can't grab something in what looks like a pharmaceutical bottle and trust that you know the whole supply chain and that that's really what it says it is. So let's move
Absolutely.
on to, sorry.
No, I was agreeing with you, and also to thanks for the clarification with regards to marijuana laced with fentanyl, because some folks didn't know that those two connected, of course, produce serious overdose.
Mhm.
So thanks for the emphasis placed on that.
Exactly.
Do you have information on where people can get their pills tested? I mean, we don't want people getting pills off the street anyway, but if people are going to, there's sometimes I've
I
seen.
have some fentanyl test strips in the office. But yeah, I think we want people to they can get fentanyl test strips sometimes like from a needle exchange or something like that. But then you have to test every product before you use it, right? So that was to talk about like, what are opioids, right? So now let's look at how does misuse occur. So one of the reasons that, sorry, I have to move stuff around on my screen. One of the reasons that we were talking about prescription drugs is the opioid epidemic in this country started with prescription drug misuse. What happens is, you know, going back to the 90s, the pharmaceutical companies were trying to sell their product, their opioids, and they started training doctors and nurses and saying, you know, one of the basic indicators of patient health shouldn't just be blood pressure and pulse. Let's look at managing pain. Ask people about their pain, and the messages, pain can be 100% controlled. We can just give you pain relievers and they will take care of that. You don't need to feel that pain. And the pain relievers are not addictive. So in the 90s, there started to be a huge amount of prescriptions of pain relievers without recognizing that they were in fact addictive. When things are prescribed to you by a doctor, people tend to believe that then they're not that dangerous, even though they all come with warning labels. So people didn't really worry too much about getting addicted. They brought them home, stuck them in their medicine cabinet. We're all used to opening our medicine cabinet all the time and seeing stuff in there. And so people have access. And generally there wasn't really this perception of harm. So it turns out that research says that about half of prescription opioids that are used illicitly, meaning not because a doctor gave you a prescription, it's because you're getting it from your family, you're getting it from your friends. Someone's like, oh, I have a leftover Vicodin from my, you know, wisdom teeth being pulled, and they give it to you. But then this chart is just to show what happens when you start using prescription drugs. If someone gives you a 5-day initial prescription of drugs, there's a 10% chance that 1 year later, you are still using opioids. They give you a 5-day prescription and a year later, you're still on them, right? That means you didn't stop after 5 days. That's because they can become physically addictive sometimes in very few days, like 6-7 days. If you got a 30-day initial prescription, which used to be extremely common, even after like wisdom teeth and so forth, there's a 45% chance that you're still using prescription drugs prescription opioids a year later. that means, it's too long. The longer your prescription was given to you for, the more chance you were going to get addicted. So that is, oh, sorry, there's something that was supposed to pop up at the bottom of the screen. I can't see the bottom of my own screen because of my menu bar. So this is the path that has frequently led people to become, sort of addicted to prescription drugs. And then after a while, it's hard to doctor shop and keep getting your prescriptions filled, and it becomes expensive. And then people would switch to heroin, which was more easily accessible illicitly and cheaper. So this is a path to a substance use disorder, which is defined as a chronic, relapsing and remitting, life-threatening disease. With relapsing, I have this little asterisk here. NIDA says 40 to 60% of people with a substance use disorder relapse. So let's highlight that means the other 40 to 60% of people don't, right? Relapse is not a part of everyone's recovery journey, but it is a part of many people's. And then that's really when it's appropriate to keep meeting people with messages of love and support and say, this isn't the end. This doesn't mean it can't happen, right? Recovery is possible. The three characteristics are tolerance, withdrawal, and loss of control. So tolerance meaning your body adjusts to the level that you're using, and now you need more to get the same effect. Withdrawal referring to, the symptoms, the physical symptoms even that you have, like with opioids, if you don't use the product when you're accustomed to it, your body has terrible, nausea and fevers and all these things. They tell you it only lasts for a few days, but Allie, I think you've told me it can last up to a couple of weeks, right? I don't know if she's there or talking, maybe muted. Anyway, it can last a long time, very unpleasant. And loss of control, meaning that this, even though it has negative consequences for your life may start to be driven by, I need to get more, I need to stay in touch with my dealer, even if I'm trying to cut back, I need to be able to access, I need to be able to secure my drugs, etc. But important message to send to anyone is treatment works, recovery is possible. So we just talked about how prescription drugs can lead to heroin. We also talked about how synthetic drugs started to come along. And this is just to show you that we are now in what's considered the fourth wave of the opioid epidemic. So the 90s were the prescription, then heroin, etc. Notice that each wave of the epidemic is getting bigger and bigger. So we're now in the fourth wave where there's just even more synthetics out there, and now the counterfeit drug form. So now we've talked about how someone has developed a substance use disorder. We want to make sure everyone understands how closely, and unfortunately, this is related with suicide. So if you think about all the people who die from an overdose, 20 to 40% of those deaths are actually intentional. So they're actually suicides. If you think about all the people who die by suicide, well, 22% of those people died with alcohol in their system and 20% with opioids in their system. There's just a very tight connection here. About, more than a quarter of people who have OUD, that means opioid use disorder, report that they have had both, they've experienced both unintentional overdose and have made suicide attempts. So whether you're, thinking about or talking about or working with someone with mental illness or a substance use disorder, it's really important to be talking about both sides of the coin, right? And seeing how they're doing and checking in both ways. This affects a lot of people, right? Over 3 million Americans have co-occurring mental health and substance use. That leads into some data, just a couple quick slides. This is what's been happening nationally, and this is just to show you when we say epidemic. In 2010, we had just over 40,000 opioid deaths that year, or overdose deaths. By 2017 and 19, it was 80,000. So it almost doubled in 10 years. That's the deaths. What about Connecticut? Just from 2015 to 2020, just look at the number of deaths and how they've increased from over 700 to almost 1,400. So they've basically doubled in about 6 years. And again, in Connecticut, this is just to show you, of everyone who has died of an overdose, 93% of them had opioids in them, okay? Because you can overdose on just benzos or alcohol, right? But you can see here that 84% of all these overdoses now in the last year, in the last full year of data that we have, involve fentanyl. So who's at risk of an opioid overdose? First of all, let's just define overdose. Opioids affect the part of your brain that affects breathing. So when the person takes too much, what's going to happen is there's an impact on the brain, but the brain's going to slow down your breathing and your heartbeat, and you just essentially slow down until you stop breathing. That is a somewhat slow process, which is why you have the opportunity to intervene. Who's the typical overdose victim in Connecticut is a non-Hispanic white male who is middle-aged, okay? That doesn't mean it's not women too. That doesn't mean it's not people of color who are also dying from overdoses, but that's like the most typical pattern. And if you look over here at overdoses by decade of age, you can see that people in their 30s represented 29% of overdose deaths in Connecticut, followed by people in their 50s, people in their 40s. So it's really those middle ages are where most overdose deaths are occurring. If you're trying to think about who might be at risk in your life with opioids or, you know, with clients, chronic pain patients are at high risk because they're often given opioids for long-term use. So they have access. They could accidentally or on purpose mix them together. Chronic pain is associated with depression and suicidal ideation. So that's a high risk group. Senior citizens, like the older you get, the more likely, not always, but the more likely you are to have various ailments where you might be given different prescriptions, which you may mix up accidentally. You know, you think you took your morning dose and you didn't, but you know, and you take it again by accident. So again, senior citizens tend to have more drugs around on hand than other ages. And then young people may just experiment with them at home on their own or in a party situation. And young adults 18 to 25 use opioids at higher rates than other population groups. I'm not going to read every risk factor on the screen, but I want to point out a couple things. So you can have people who are using opioids on a regular basis or misusing opioids on a regular basis, and they develop a level of tolerance to the amount that they keep taking. Now, let's say they go to a rehab or they go to prison and they no longer can access their drug. When they come back out, they want to use again, and they go and they get the same amount that they're used to, but their body's tolerance has been reduced, and that's a high risk moment for overdose. So a lot of people coming out of correctional facilities have overdosed as a result of exactly that phenomenon. If you know someone who's using opioids, you want to encourage them to never use alone, right? Because overdoses are pretty frequent. Who's gonna, you know, you're not going to administer Narcan to yourself when you're passed out. Mixing opioids and benzos and or alcohol is a really super dangerous situation. And the majority of overdose deaths, even like, especially before fentanyl started to be so prevalent in the system, the majority of the overdose deaths data that I've looked at in Connecticut, I've gone through all the deaths a couple of years ago to put together some data. It was people who had all three of these in their system. Okay. And of course, if you have other health issues, that puts you at higher risk. So I'm just trying to check on time. Okay. How would you recognize an opioid overdose? So let's say, you know, you see someone and you're wondering, you know, someone seems to be like passed out, and, you know, maybe some of those risk factors that we just talked about are in place, maybe not. But what are things you're looking for? Well, if they're, you know, they're nodding off, they seem super sleepy, you can't wake them up. Their breathing is slow, or they're not breathing, no heartbeat. These are all, remember that this is shutting down your breathing. So all of these things could mean an opioid overdose. Skin is cold and clammy. A lot of these symptoms could be from something else, but the pinpoint little pupils, if you open the eyes and see teeny tiny pupils, that's kind of a giveaway of an opioid overdose. And of course, if your fingernails or lips are blue, that's a sign you don't have enough oxygen. So all of these could say to you, this person has overdosed. And that's when you would think I should be administering Narcan. So we're going to watch a quick 2-minute video about Narcan.
Naloxone saves lives. No time to sit idly by. More and more people are dying of overdose from the likes of heroin, fentanyl, and prescription pain medications like oxycodone and hydrocodone. These are all examples of opioids. Opioids are drugs derived from the opium poppy plant or made in the lab. They can treat pain, cough, and diarrhea. But opioids can also be addictive and even deadly. The number of opioid overdose deaths has escalated more than 400% since the turn of the century, with tens of thousands of lives now being lost every year. But many deaths can be prevented with a life-saving treatment, naloxone. When given right away, naloxone can work in minutes to reverse an overdose. Naloxone is safe, has few side effects, and some forms can be administered by friends and family. When is naloxone used? You can save a life. First, recognize signs of overdose: limp body, pale clammy face, blue fingernails or lips, vomiting or gurgling sounds, inability to speak or be awakened, slow breathing, or heartbeat. If you see these symptoms, call 911 immediately and consider the use of naloxone if available. How is naloxone given? Home preparations include a nasal spray given to someone while they lie on their back, or a device that automatically injects medicine into the thigh. Sometimes, more than one dose is needed. The person's breathing also needs to be monitored. If the person stops breathing, consider rescue breaths and CPR if you are trained, until first responders arrive. How does naloxone work?
Okay. We're not going to watch the rest of that video right now, but I thought I liked the video because it's a good little refresher or review of the things we just covered. And it gives you a visual for how simple it is to actually administer Narcan, okay? But we're going to walk through it step by step. A few things you need to know about Narcan. So first of all, it only reverses an opioid overdose. So if someone has overdosed on Xanax or Ativan or something, it won't revive them, but also it's not going to hurt them. Narcan has little to no adverse effects. I've never heard of an example of anyone who is even allergic to it. It doesn't get you high. It's not able to be abused. So essentially there is no harm, no foul in administering Narcan if you're not sure what's going on, but you find someone who you can't awaken and who has these other symptoms and you think it might be an opioid overdose. Important to know, Narcan stays in your body for about 20 to 90 minutes. Why such a wide range? It's based on your body height and weight, okay? So it's very important to realize that it will wear off, because if it wears off before the actual opioids in your system get metabolized, you can re-overdose, okay? So one thing that's gonna be very important is that the person who is revived needs to get medical care afterwards to make sure they don't overdose again. Also, how does it actually work, right? What happens is it's an opioid antagonist instead of an agonist. So there are opioid receptors in your brain, and Narcan, and you have opioids that are attached to those receptors, like your heroin or whatever, and Narcan comes along and bumps them off. And so you go into instant withdrawal. So when this person wakes up, that's a very unpleasant feeling, right? To go from super high to withdrawal, just boom. Narcan comes in different forms, but you are going to get the intranasal form, which is a nasal spray that looks like this. So that's the only one I'm really going to talk about. You will have a box that looks exactly like this, and it contains 2 devices like this in there. Each one has 4 milligrams of Narcan. As you can see, you stick this piece here, you hold it like this, and you stick one piece into your nose, the person's nostril, and then you just literally pump up, the plunger, and the spray goes in their nose. They literally respond within a couple of minutes. If they don't, that's why there's a second dose in the box. So Other couple quick facts that you should know. When you have your Narcan, if you keep it in your office, if you keep it in your home, if you keep it in your purse with you, don't have to worry about it. It doesn't have to be refrigerated. It's shelf stabilized. Do not put it in the refrigerator. Don't keep it in your car because your car is basically like an oven, right? It's a metal box that absorbs the sun's rays. It gets too hot in there. It expires after 2 to 3 years, but there is a date on the box, so you can just check that date. What are your 4 steps in recognizing and responding to an overdose or potential overdose? Very simple. You're going to call 911 first, then you're going to check for the response of the person, administer Narcan, and then we'll go over the aftercare. Okay. So let's say you see someone anywhere and they seem to be kind of passed out, hard to waken up. Number 1, you call 911. You don't even check to see if it's an opioid situation first. Why? Could be something else, could be a heart attack. You're going to need 911 to come for that. 2, as I said, you may revive them with Narcan. They can re-overdose. You need 911 on the way no matter what. So that's number 1. Now you're going to check to see if it's potentially an overdose. So one of the key things is, can you really wake them up or not? Maybe they're kind of gurgling, maybe they're, you're checking to see if they're breathing. You're going to look at their eyes to see if they've got that pinpoint pupil. You're going to see if they seem to be turning blue. One of the things that they recommend is you take your knuckles and you rub really hard on the sternum, because that's supposed to be kind of unpleasant enough to wake them up. But you check and you're not waking them up. So you think, I'm going to give them Narcan. And what you're going to do is make sure they're lying flat on their back. And you need to kind of open up their airways. So on the screen here, it says put one hand under their neck and tilt their head back. Down here, it shows you can also kind of push down on their forehead and lift up on their chin in this picture. And then you're going to take this device and I don't know, are you guys seeing me or just the screen? I don't know if it's worth me trying to show you. Like I've got the actual kit here, but it looks like, oh, you can, okay. So, these things are made to open very quickly. It just peels open and you just take this and literally, hold it like this. And you just put it in your nose until your fingers are hitting the bottom of the nostril. You've got this person's head tilted back and you just depress that plunger. Okay. So now you've administered the Narcan and your next step involves checking to see if they're breathing and if their heart is beating, okay? If they're breathing, good. Roll them onto their side while you're waiting for them to wake up because you don't want them to vomit and aspirate, right? But if they're not breathing, this is when you check for all those other symptoms, right? So if they're not breathing, normally it's recommended by WHO, CDC, all the biggies that you would provide rescue breaths if you're trained to do so. During COVID, they're advising against that. Okay, so you don't have to do that, but one day COVID will end. You can check for a pulse. If there's no pulse, obviously provide CPR. So what you really want to remember is breathing and heartbeat, like you would think of for anyone that you found, kind of passed out. But the good thing is whatever you're providing, it's not going to last long, right? Because you called 911 and they're on the way. You're waiting only a couple minutes to see if they wake up. If they don't wake up in 2 or 3 minutes, you administer the other dose that's also in your box. The second dose, they tell you to put it in the other nostril, just in case there's any blockage in the first nostril. I mean, your nostrils connect, so I don't know how much that matters. You should know that with fentanyl being so strong, and carfentanil being out there are people who need 3 to 4 doses to be revived. You're only going to have 2 doses in your box unless you have another source from somewhere else. But again, if you gave them 2 doses, that may be already a good starter. And by the time 911 comes, they're going to have more Narcan with them. Be aware that when the person revives, they're going to, last thing they knew they were high, and the next thing they know, like they're in withdrawal, they may not know what happened. They probably don't know that they essentially died. So kind of be gentle with them, explain what happened. They may want to go use again. Try to keep them with you and encourage them not to do that and wait for help. And again, I want to emphasize they really should be monitored medically in case the Narcan wears off before the opioid that's in their system, in case they re-overdose. So now I want to just highlight a couple key resources you should know. One of them is just legislatively. In Connecticut, there's been a lot of legislation passed since these 4 waves of the epidemic started. Ever since 2011, we've had the Good Samaritan law. That means if you are trying to help someone and something happens to them, you know, like I said, nobody seems to be allergic to Narcan, but somehow you hit the one person who's allergic to Narcan, or you try to revive them and they die anyway, and the family says, I'm going to sue. They can't. You were trying to help. We have changed the number of days that initial prescriptions can be given. We require anyone who can prescribe medication, whether pharmacist, or doctor, nurse, veterinarian, is required to be using the prescription drug monitoring program to keep a record of who has what prescriptions and where are they getting them filled. And that's an attempt to make sure people aren't, kind of shopping around. And another thing I want you to know is this here. This is the voluntary non-opioid directive. So if you or a client of yours or a friend of yours who maybe has struggled with substance use, or maybe is afraid that they are predisposed to substance use, if you're seeking medical help for something, you go to the hospital and they're going to give you a pain reliever. You can fill out this form. And it says, when you give me a pain reliever, I don't want it to be an opioid. Okay. So I'm going to send you this slideshow later, so you'll be able to click on all these links and just get that form. There's a couple of slides summarizing the legislation if you want to geek out on it. And then I want to talk about a few different apps and websites. This one here, let me move this again. This one here is called Nora Saves, norasaves.com. And it's a website. And when you go there on your phone, it pops up at the bottom of the screen that says, do you want to download this app? And you say yes. Notice that up here you can get it in Spanish, Portuguese, and Polish. And it's just a free app that basically visually walks you through all the stages in, like, could this be an opioid? How do I administer Narcan? How do I report that I saved someone? It's like you literally swipe through photos and it walks you through an emergency really quickly. Live Loud is a Connecticut website really aimed at opioid use disorders, people living with an opioid use disorder, people trying to achieve recovery, maintain recovery. Great resource. And if you notice, when I click on this little button next to Live Loud, I can swap over to the Live Loud Families website to support the families of someone with an opioid disorder. Another great resource. Change the Script is a Connecticut resource with just like informational flyers to post. This one is drugfreect.org, great for families, and you think you know ct.org, also great for families. So check them out, share them with others. When you get the website, you can click on all the links, the slideshow, you can click on all of these. And finally, I want to end with just a few messages to make sure you're sharing with others. From a prevention standpoint, we want to make sure that we ourselves and everyone we know are safely storing our medications and our alcohol and our recreational cannabis, if we have that as well, right? Keep them locked up, keep them out of the access of kids. That's where a lot of problems start. Also, in terms of how we get rid of drugs that we're done with, or that have expired, or that we don't want to have keeping around and we don't need to use them. Everyone should know where their local medication drop box is, and they look like this. And in most towns, they're in the lobby of the police station. You don't have to talk to anyone. You go in there, drop stuff in there, and they take care of this stuff and safely dispose of it so it doesn't get diverted. You can also dispose of your drugs and everything, including like nicotine patches, in your trash if you mix it with something. So what you don't want to do is flush stuff because then it ends up in the water supply. And that's why when they test kids' blood, they find that like American kids all have like endocrine disruptors in them because it's from, people flushing birth control pills and stuff, right? So you can take a Ziploc bag and dump a bunch of kitty litter in there or coffee grounds, throw your meds in there, like maybe up to 40 pills at a time, throw some water in there, zip it up and just shake the hell out of it. And it all disintegrates. And then you just throw the entire sealed bag in your trash. That's essentially what a doTERRA bag is, except it uses charcoal and some other chemicals to disintegrate your drugs. And finally, a couple other quick messages that we want to make sure everyone knows. Again, treatment is effective and recovery is possible. The gold standard treatment for opioids is for someone to do medication-assisted treatment as well as therapy. And of course, peer support is huge. But medication-assisted treatment is usually methadone, Suboxone, or Vivitrol. Not everyone needs all of these, but the research says you live longer, you're more likely to live longer if you do that. Like those are the people who survive better. This is Connecticut's 24/7 free substance use hotline. They can connect people to detox. The idea is if that door opens and someone who's been misusing substances says, I'm ready to go get help, we don't want there to be a delay. Call that number. They're supposed to be able to connect you to the nearest open program. Sometimes they can even provide transportation. And these websites are the DEMIS addiction beds and mental health beds websites that are updated twice a day with what's currently open. So thank you for helping to prevent substance misuse and support recovery. We have 1 minute left first of all, for everyone to say, do you feel like you'd be comfortable administering Narcan, recognizing when and how to administer Narcan? Okay, I see Bob saying yes. I can't see other people's faces.
Yes.
Good, all right.
Yes.
Any questions?
Yes.